My name is Akihito Kadowaki. I'm the producer of Onimusha Way of the Sword.
はい、今回ディレクターを担当している、
And my name is Satoru Nihei, and I'm the director, and I've worked on a variety of action titles at Capcom in the past, including Exoprimal, Dragon's Dogma Online, and Sengoku Basara.
アクションリーダーだったりという、アクションをメインに、これまで作ってきました。
Thank you guys again very much for your time. First thing I wanted to ask, it's been a long time since the last Onimusha game came out. What kind of makes, like, right now, the time to bring the series back?
We actually have wanted to continue the series ever since the last title was released, but just a confluence of factors meant that it never quite came together until early 2020, which was when this project kicked off development. Part of it was getting the core team that we wanted to work on the game to be available, and everyone had this or that project in the lineup they had to take care of first. And also technologically speaking, it was with the development of our internal RE engine that we actually saw the technological possibilities coming together to make this title possible. So it's been a long time coming for us too.
How did you approach carrying the spirit of the old series into this very modern game?
It was really important to us to continue the series' legacy of satisfying action, particularly the well-known Isen move that's forming one of the core parts of the action gameplay of the new game. And I think that if we can replicate that feel of how satisfying the original game was to play at the time, then that's a really solid base for us to build the new title around.
I like how deliberate and strategic the combat seems to be from what we saw in the demo. What are the inspirations for this sort of slower paced sort of combat? Does that pace change over the course of the game?
What we wanted to do was have the action gameplay be about reading your opponent's moves and deciding strategically, moment by moment, how you're going to take each enemy on. And I think that naturally led to a slightly more deliberate pacing of the action, rather than us starting out to think about how fast the pacing should be. In particular, because you have the Oni Gauntlet that Musashi uses. He has moments where he's doing a slow sort of samurai style read of what action to take next, and then with certain moves you can do superhuman speed dodges and things like that. So there is a bit of a push and pull between those two elements of the game's pacing.
Many games tie parrying to blocking, but obviously that's kind of the iconic difference in Onimusha. What kind of gameplay does the more active parry system here help to build?
Yeah, we wanted to have a risk and reward to the action. So the fact that to carry off the Isen, you're not doing it from a defensive posture, but you're actually choosing the timing to meet an attack with an attack. And if you get that wrong, you're obviously going to take damage. But if you get it right, then you can carry off a powerful move, which can even be a one-hit kill for some of the weaker enemies. Combining that with our multiple different variations on the parry style combat, such as redirect, split, by catching the enemy's attack at the same time, you can sort of change the positioning of their stance and use that to your advantage. Then we just feel it's a more active way to get players involved with reading and reacting to the enemy's moves than just constantly being on defense.
The section we saw in the demo was kind of a pretty straightforward shot from beginning to end. Are there ever like alternate routes through the levels or more reasons to explore?
Most of the stage construction is similar to what you saw, so it's got fairly linear segments, and then there'll be some branching paths or parts where the stage breaks out into a slightly more open area for you to explore. There's also side missions to explore too, which we didn't really show today, but you might take a chance to talk to some villagers and take on some side content that takes you to a different part of the stage as well.
Can you expand on that side story content a little more?
We're not going into too much detail about it now, but as the setting is Kyoto, you'll be able to talk to the denizens of that city, and they might have requests that they make of Musashi and ask him to help them out in various ways. And there's also Musashi's companions on his journey who are sort of his friendly characters who might also at certain points in the game ask you to go and do certain things for them. So it's a classic villager side quest structure.
It looks like there are a lot of ways to kind of use the environment to defeat enemies. Can you give some examples of how that sort of thing works in the gameplay?
There are definitely more environmental props than the fire torches that you saw in the presentation. We're not quite getting into them just yet, but it's more than just what you saw. So please be excited.
Do weapons and abilities, is there an upgrade system? Do you sort of get more over the course of the game?
Yes, so you will have noticed that there's the red souls that appear when you defeat certain enemies. You collect those to gain XP, which you can then spend as part of a skill tree system, and that's going to allow you to access new skills.
We saw a quick example of Oni Vision during the demo, but what kinds of things does that kind of unlock for the player to see as they're exploring?
We're keeping the details of those for maybe some of the next beats we have in the campaign, but as you will have seen, they're essentially part of the traversal or exploration phase of a stage, so it's a feature that you can use to try and find your way around and get to the next area you're supposed to get to. But exactly what form that takes, watch this space.
I was interested to hear during the presentation that you worked with temple officials to make sure the depictions were accurate. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
We worked with the Kimizudera, the temple officials. It was important to us to make sure that we were presenting these real-world locations in Kyoto in Japan, not just realistically in terms of how they're laid out today, but also thinking back to how they would have looked at the time setting that the game is in. There's a part of me that wants people who play the game and perhaps they have a chance to visit the real temple in Kyoto to notice how well we were able to recreate it and spot all the parts that feel just like the game. But I also think that you'll be able to spot differences in a fun way because, of course, to make it a game stage, we have to get a little bit creative in some areas. So I'd like to think that players of Onimusha Way the Sword will enjoy comparing the real world location with our work in the game.
Onimusha kind of has something of a tradition of bringing likenesses of actors into the game test. What does bringing in the likeness of somebody like Toshiro Mifune add to the atmosphere of the game?
I mean, we're thinking about making a samurai game. Who would be the coolest actor who could portray that well-known vibe of what a samurai is? You know, they're playing these combat experts who are part of this ancient code. And really, Toshiro Mifune was the name that came up first for us. So it was just an idea that we had at the start that finally came to fruition to implement one of the most well-known samurai actors into our game. So we worked with his estate and implemented his likeness as a kind of iconic element of the character of Musashi Miyamoto. But that said, this character is our interpretation of that historical figure. So the overall acting presence of the character is something that Capcom has sort of created as an original take on his character this time around, even though he bears the likeness of that beloved actor. So to put it another way, Mifune Toshiro is not acting the part. In that sense, he's literally the face of the character who we are creating through various techniques.
On the note of that character, I was really impressed with the animations we saw in combat and the way they kind of express Musashi's personality. You go about kind of bringing the character's personality out in gameplay that way.
I think there's an image that the samurai are these, warriors who stuck very closely to the Bushido Creed, and they had strict rules about how they could fight or who they were allowed to kill or not, and that's certainly part of their historical legacy, but we wanted to sort of change that image and play with it. Musashi Miyamoto is a figure who we felt wouldn't be averse to bending or breaking the rules and using what was available to him in any given situation to just survive and, win each fight and get to the next one. And whether that means, as you will have seen in the presentation, grabbing a tatami mat and throwing it at his enemy to destabilize them, or taking opportunities to choose weapons other than a katana if the opportunity arises in order to defeat a foe. Those are parts that we felt we could build a new image of a samurai around that and then portray that through the animations that you saw, where it's a very fluid and responsive style of fighting rather than just a character who has a specific moveset, because those are the moves that are sort of built into their way of life. So it was an overall approach that we had.
We saw a couple of different boss fights during the presentation as well, and two very different ones, a very human-like enemy, a very monstrous enemy. How do those different types of enemy styles, I guess, create different types of gameplay for the boss fights?
Yeah, there's certainly two sides to the combat, in the sense that the more human-like characters, such as the boss Ganyu or even some of the more human demon figures, they're sort of like, Chambara, swordplay, clashing swords style, and having that with certain enemies and then changing it up with the more beast-like demons or more monstrous ones. I think it's just going to keep players on their toes, because they can't just stick to one strategy. They might be using a certain type in certain parts of the stage, and then whenever the boss is something totally different, they really have to think of the tool set that they have in a different way and really take each encounter as it comes and consider what they're going to have to do to get through it.